Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of 3 Wide. I'm your host, Radney Crawford. The playoff field has been set for the NASCAR Cup Series after another great race at Darlington Raceway, where Chase Briscoe came through with a clutch win, putting himself into the playoffs, as well as Stewart-Haas Racing in their final year of competition. He was able to hold off a hard-charging Kyle Busch, who was also looking for that final playoff spot. We're going to take a look over Chase's run to the checkered flag, as well as the playoff field, and who is in danger of being eliminated in the first round. But before we get into all that, let's hear a word from our presenting sponsor, Hunt to Harvest. Hunt to Harvest is back to support another season of 3 Wide, and to tell you a little about them, they are a brand created to protect the hunt and to get back to the basics and the real reason for the hunt. They're a brand that supports the harvesting of the animal instead of just focusing on the trophy. To Hunt to Harvest, hunting is all about spending time with loved ones, providing for your family through the harvest, and giving thanks to the one who created all things. And you too can support this great mission and company by going to hunttoharvest.com and updating or upgrading your hunting apparel. They now have several new shirt designs, and these shirts are made out of 100% Peruvian cotton, true to size after one wash. They also have new rope hats in, but they are moving fast, so you better get your order in quick. And you can do that by heading over to hunttoharvest.com, and when you go to checkout, be sure to use the promo code RADNEY18923. That's RADNEY 18923 for even more savings at checkout, and you can do this all at hunttoharvest.com. So as I said, Chase Briscoe was able to get the win on Sunday night in the Southern 500, his first Crown Jewel event win, putting himself into the playoffs as well as Stewart-Haas Racing in their final year of competition. And Chase, he was up front for most of the night. He made a great 3-wide move to get the lead on a restart from Ross Chastain, who was on older tires. But then Chase had to survive some restarts himself, holding off Kyle Busch, who was on fresher tires, and was able to get the victory. And for Kyle Busch, this was his third straight top 5 finish since coming back from the Olympic break. They've looked like a completely different team, and this is also his second straight second place finish after finishing second to Harrison Burton at Daytona. Now, for Busch, it was too little too late for him to get this momentum going after all the struggles they had in the first half of the year. Even races where they had good speed, it just seemed like everything that could go wrong did for Kyle Busch. He did seem upbeat about it, knowing that this is what the system is, and they just had too many mistakes in the first part of the year, and they didn't come through. But for Kyle, he still has plenty on the line to race for the rest of the season as he looks to continue his win streak. Now, while it may not count for much, Kyle has shown over the past 2 weeks exactly how you should race for the win. I understand sometimes contact is going to be made. A bump and run is going to happen, and there's nothing wrong with that. But with the controversial finish with Kyle's teammate Austin Dillon at Richmond, where he wrecks Joey Logano and he wrecks Denny Hamlin to get the checkered flag, Austin did get to keep the win, but it didn't get him in the playoffs. But after that race, many were saying how this is not good for younger drivers to see that are trying to work their way up through the ranks. They see what Austin Dillon did and think that's the way to race. You have to put the bumper to somebody and put them in the wall if it means you can get the win. But what Kyle has done over the past 2 weeks is completely flip that narrative. He's raced hard, he's raced aggressive, but he hasn't went across the line. Sunday night was the best example for how Kyle Busch drove. He could have easily went into turns 1 and 2 or 3 and 4 in those last 2 laps and put Briscoe in the fence. He could have spun him out. He could have done a number of things that would have ended Briscoe's night, and Kyle would have gotten the victory and be in the playoffs right now. Instead, Busch raced it clean. He tried to win the right way and pass him clean, and it just didn't happen. And that's the way racing is. Sometimes you're not the best car of the night. Sometimes it doesn't go your way. You just have to settle for what you got. And I think with the way Kyle has run this year, and with all this went on with his teammate, and seeing how these younger drivers race, not just Austin Dillon, but through the Xfinity Series, through the Truck Series, he is setting a better example. Now, if this had been 5 to 10 years ago, I think it's a completely different story. I think Briscoe's in the wall or spun out, and Kyle Busch is going to victory lane and going to the playoffs. But I do believe Kyle Busch deserves some credit for how he has raced these young drivers over the past 2 weeks. At Daytona, he could have been more aggressive and how he was trying to pass Harrison Burton coming to the checkered flag. Instead, he didn't push the issue and wound up second, and it just didn't work out for him over these past 2 weeks. And unfortunately, that means Kyle's not going playoff racing, but he, like I said, he does still have a lot to race for. And before we look at the playoff field, Briscoe's run on Sunday night, this was a team that came in ready to win, that, as he said in his post-race interview, this team had one last bullet in the chamber, and did they fire it at the right time? Briscoe was strong throughout the night. He was a good, solid second or third place car, and he was able to take advantage of the situation in front of him with Ty Gibbs and Ross Chastain and Kyle Larson, and able to make a 3-wide move and get the lead, and that is the move that won him the race. He was able to make it without contact with anyone, sending anyone into the wall. He was able to win the right way, and now he's going playoff racing where really you shouldn't discount him for making a good run into the playoffs. Now, this year's playoff field is quite diverse, but you do have your usual suspects up at the front. You have Kyle Larson leading the way, followed by Christopher Bell. Then you have regular season champion Tyler Reddick, followed by William Byron. Then defending champion Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, and Chase Elliott. And after Chase Elliott, it's a pretty mixed bag of drivers in the playoff field. You have Brad Keselowski, who may not be a surprise driver in the playoffs, but he did break that winless streak at Darlington in the spring, putting himself into the playoff field. Then you have Joey Logano, who has struggled with consistency all season long, but fortunately for him, he was able to get the win at Nashville, and that locked him in on a spot in the playoffs. Next is his teammate Austin Cindric, who also broke his long winless streak with a win at Gateway, and what was a pretty dominant performance by Austin Cindric. After Cindric, you have Daniel Suarez, who won in that thrilling 3-wide photo finish at Atlanta, and after Suarez is Alex Bowman, who won at Chicago, the first win since coming back from his injury last season. After Bowman, you have Chase Briscoe, the winner of Sunday's Southern 500. And after Briscoe, you have probably the biggest wild card of this playoff field, which is Harrison Burton, who won at Daytona after a push from Parker Retzlaff, of all people, got him around Kyle Busch, and he was able to get the Wood brothers their 100th victory and his first career victory at Daytona. Then you have Ty Gibbs and Martin Truex Jr., the only two drivers to make it into the playoff field on points. Now, in today's video, we're just going to be focusing on the first round of the playoffs and what drivers are in danger of being eliminated and what drivers I believe will be ultimately eliminated from the playoff field. Now, I believe the danger zone is from Logano to Truex. Everybody above that, I believe, will be fine. Brad Keselowski has shown enough strength and consistency this season with tracks like Atlanta, Watkins Glen, and Bristol. I believe he will be safe there and he'll have good runs. I think he will be okay. Now, from Logano on down, as far as what drivers I think would be the most safe of that group, I have to start with Chase Briscoe. Mainly because he has a higher average finish than Austin Cindric, than Joey Logano, than Daniel Suarez, than Harrison Burton, and his average finish is right there with Martin Truex Jr. So if Briscoe can just keep up with that level, have good solid runs, get stage points, I believe he will be fine. He'll move on to the next round. Now, he is going to have to step up his performance at these next three tracks. They're not his best. He's had decent runs at Bristol and at Watkins Glen, but with him being the lone Stewart-Haas racing car in the field, I believe they're going to put what remaining resources they have, everything into this 14 car so he can make as deep a run into the playoffs as he can. Outside of Briscoe, Daniel Suarez, Austin Cindric, Harrison Burton, their best chances of moving on is going to come in these first two races. For Harrison, mainly at Atlanta. It's pretty much win or nothing for Harrison. If he doesn't win at Atlanta, he's not going to make it into the next round. I think he's the easiest choice to say he's going to be eliminated. But he does have a chance at Atlanta. Being a super speedway race, Harrison's confidence is at an all-time high. And he's also the most recent winner of a super speedway race at Daytona. So it's, while unlikely, it isn't impossible for Harrison Burton. So he will be a driver to keep an eye on throughout the race Sunday. For him, I think the best chance, if he wants to be there at the end, is to stick at the back, let these other drivers kind of take each other out and race aggressive. You just want to be there at the end like you were at Daytona. For Cindric and Suarez, luckily for them, their best two styles of racing at super speedways and road courses are the first two races of this first round with Atlanta and Watkins Glen. So if they go out and they don't have the best race at Atlanta, at least they still have Watkins Glen to look forward to. I would look for Suarez to be better at Atlanta and Cindric to run better at Watkins Glen. Now, as far as the two drivers who made the playoffs on points, teammates Ty Gibbs and Martin Truex Jr., when you look at these two drivers, I believe you have to give the edge to Ty Gibbs between the two as far as who has the better chance to advance through the first round. Ty has simply had a better season overall. He has shown no signs of a sophomore slump, and he's been in contention for his first career win in several races. Plus, when you look at the 3-race stretch in the first round of the playoffs with Atlanta, Watkins Glen, and Bristol, those are good tracks for him. At Atlanta and Bristol in the spring, he had top 10 finishes in both. The last time we were at the road course was in Chicago, where Ty again led multiple laps and was in contention for the win, ultimately finishing in third. Also, Ty has more momentum on his side with 2 top 5s in the last 3 races, and with getting wins even more important now than they were in the regular season, I think this team is closer to finding victory lane than the 19 team. Now, looking at Martin Truex Jr., he has had a solid season, especially in the first half. This year, he has scored 9 top 10 finishes, but 7 of those came in the first 16 races. Since then, he has only scored 2 top 10s, the last coming at Pocono in the middle of July. So it has been a tough stretch for Martin. He's not even scored a top 20 finish since Pocono. However, his saving grace in this first round is Watkins Glen. That is the one track in this 3-race stretch where he does have a Cup Series win in his career. He also has 4 top 5s in the last 6 races there, so this is going to be his best chance at not only getting to victory lane, but also getting ahead of that playoff cut line. And when you look at Bristol, he did finish second there in the spring, but overall his runs at Bristol are not that spectacular. So they are really going to have to rely on those notes from the spring. And with that being said, I would like to see Martin make it far into the playoffs, given that this is his last full-time season. And anytime you have a driver of his caliber retiring, you want to see them go out on top. Not necessarily as champion, but in the Final Four winning races. And if Martin is able to survive this first round, I believe the playoff schedule gets stronger for him as you go. You'll have tracks coming up like Martinsville, the Roval, Kansas, Las Vegas, all tracks that he has had great success at since joining Toyota. And for the drivers I've yet to mention, Alex Bowman and Joey Logano. Starting with Logano, as I said earlier, he has struggled with consistency. He has shown flashes here and there, the win at Nashville, a top 5 every now and then. But for the most part, this team has been a top 15 to top 20 car. And that's just not going to cut it if you're wanting to make a run for the championship. Now, for Logano, what's the positive for him is his experience. He's been in numerous playoffs, win or be eliminated situations. He's a multi-time Cup champion. That is something that he can rely on, especially with the inexperience around him in this playoff field. As far as Alex Bowman goes, his season started out a lot like Truex Jr.'s. He was very consistent, his usual consistent self. He was able to score top 10s, top 5s, keeping himself in a good spot in the points. Then he was able to get that first win since coming back from his injury at Chicago. And ever since that race, the finishes have kind of trailed off. You don't see the top 10s or the top 5s like we saw throughout the first half of the year. Now, that could be because Blake Harris is focusing on the playoffs and getting everything ready that he can to help his driver make it deep into a playoff run. With Blake Harris and Paul Wolfe, who's the crew chief of Logano, I wouldn't put anything past either of those guys. Blake Harris is a newer crew chief, but he seems to be one of the top up-and-comers of his profession. As for Paul Wolfe, he is a former championship-winning crew chief, and he's very good at what he does. So I would not discount either of these drivers, even with the inconsistency of Logano and the fall-off of Bowman over the past couple of months. These 2 drivers will still be key to watch in round 1. For my prediction on which drivers will be eliminated after the checkered flag falls at Bristol, I believe it will be Harrison Burton, who, as I said earlier, is the easy choice to be eliminated. Also joining him in elimination is Austin Cindric, Daniel Suarez, and Martin Truex Jr. And that'll wrap up today's episode. As always, thank y'all for joining me and watching along. If you haven't done it already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you will know when our new videos drop, including our weekly Drivers to Watch list shorts. You can also find me on Facebook, X, and Instagram. Those links are down in the description below, as well as a link to our sponsor, Hunt to Harvest. So if you're needing new hunting apparel, that's the link to click on, and it will hook you up with that promo code. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week and enjoy the action on Sunday as the NASCAR playoffs kick off at Atlanta.